What is poppin', guys? It's Lando from Today's Tech with Lando, and as you guys know, Apple just had their Worldwide Developer Conference and they have announced a slew of features for their various operating systems. So let's just dive right in, and we'll start with iOS 14. One of the main features that they have introduced is widgets on the home screen. Now, this is something that Android has had since, I believe, the inception of Android some years ago, but it is a little bit different with their implementation. So it kind of has the widget kind of has a specific grid that it has to follow. You know, it couldn't be placed right in the middle of your home screen. It's either to one side or the other, and I'll show you what that looks like. But again, another new feature that they've introduced as a part of widgets is something called Smart Stack. So you can create a stack of widgets that kind of adjust automatically based on the time of the day, or as it learns your habits and things of that nature, you know, it'll show different widgets to accommodate that time of day. So that's really neat. That's definitely not something that Android is doing, but how it differs is with Android, you can place that widget wherever you want to, and the majority of the time you can resize that widget and again place it wherever you'd like within the home screen grid. So that is a little bit different there. Now, another feature that they've introduced that I'm sure iPhone users are going to love is what they're calling App Library. So again, something that Android has had since the beginning of Android, but instead of having all your app icons on your home pages and having 8 home pages, you have now an app library that organizes your apps into different categories. So some of the categories are, you know, suggestions or recently added apps or, you know, social apps, things like that. So it is nicely categorized for you. And that is not something that you can find on Android. I know when you first set up the device, there are going to be some folders already there. I know on Samsung phones, there is a Samsung folder, or sometimes there's a Google folder, maybe even a T-Mobile folder, for example, but it is not intelligently categorized the way that Apple is doing it. So that is something that Apple is a little bit late to the game with, but they've implemented it a little bit better, I would say. Now, some of the other everyday features that Apple implemented with iOS 14 were already available on Android, and more specifically, some of them were already available on One UI from Samsung. For example, the compact calling. So instead of an incoming call notification taking up the entire screen, it is now just limited to the top of the screen, and you can interact with that, answering, declining, swiping away. And that's something that Samsung implemented with One UI 2.0 in December of 2019. So it's fairly recent, but that is one of the features that, you know, Apple, you could say Apple is borrowing, so to speak, from Android. And another feature that Apple has implemented with iOS 14 that is already available on Android is picture in picture. So for example, if you're watching a video on YouTube or Netflix, Hulu, and you swipe up to go to the home screen, well then whatever it was that you were watching will then become just a floating icon that you can actually resize, move around the display. And what's even better is that you can swipe it off the screen and the audio will continue playing. So let's say you need to type up a message really quick, and once you're done, you can bring that right back onto the screen. Now, again, this is what typically happens when Apple is a little bit late to the game with implementing a feature. They end up doing it just a little bit better. So on Android with picture-in-picture, you cannot resize the floating icon, and you cannot swipe it off the screen. If you do, that gets rid of it. So again, here's Apple, a little bit late to the game, but just a little bit better implementation, I will admit. Apple did a lot of fine tuning with iOS 14, and that is very, very evident in iMessage. They've added a few features that add a bit of customization and personalization, one of which is group photos. So you can now assign a photo or an emoji to group conversations, and then taking that a little bit further, you can now pin conversations at the top of the Messages app just so that you can find them a little bit easier. And then taking that a step further, they've added inline reply. So as the conversation goes on and various topics are brought up, you can reply to specific messages just to make sure that you get your point across and as the conversation progresses. And last but not least is mentions, which allows you to simply type someone's name to get their attention. And they've added some notification customization that allows you to only be notified when your name is mentioned, so you're not getting a slew of messages coming in that have nothing to do with you in the conversation. Now, the only one of those features that's available on Android is the message pinning, and that's actually specific to One UI from Samsung. That is not a feature that is fluid across all of Android. And as I mentioned, Apple really wanted to focus on the finer tuning, and these features really will make sure that you can stay a little bit more organized within the Messages app. Another dope feature that Apple introduced with iOS 14 is car keys. So with car keys, you'll be able to unlock and start your car just using your phone as your keys. And you'll also be able to share those keys. Say you're on vacation and you need your buddy to run some errands for you. He wants to drive your car. You can just send him that virtual car key that gives him access. And then you can also restrict the access that he has to the vehicle. Now, it is currently limited to the 2021 BMW 5 Series, but obviously that'll get expanded in the very near future. And this will be a very, very nice feature to have, something that is not available on Android, and I have not heard of it being in development or anything of the sort. So that's another one-up that Apple has. There's also some updates with the AirPods Pro. So they now have what they're calling spatial audio, which is essentially surround sound. And the way they've developed it, it makes sure that the audio stays anchored to your device. So as you move throughout the world, you're still getting that seamless, very rich surround sound experience. And as you switch devices physically, the AirPods will seamlessly switch as well. So if you're watching something on your phone, you put your phone down, you pick up your iPad, the AirPods will then switch and be tethered to your iPad. And same thing goes with your Mac. As soon as you put your iPad down and switch to your Mac, the AirPods will switch as well. So that seamless switching is very, very smooth, and it is automatic as well. Again, this is not something that is available on Android. You can switch between devices, but that is something that you would have to do manually. So again, another one-up for Apple on this one. Oh, and the automatic switching is not limited to the AirPods Pro. It does also work with the Powerbeats, the Powerbeats Pro, and the Beats Solo Pro. Now, just about all of those new iOS 14 features have carried over to iPadOS 14. Now, some of the differences, though, are the user experience has been updated a little bit. Again, Apple is focusing on that finer tuning, so we'll see a little bit of differences with the sidebars and menus and things like that. They're just a little bit refined on iPadOS 14. The search functionality has been simplified to a much smaller, more compact design, and it also features autofill. So as you type in and search for things, you can see a list based on what you've typed in so far. There's also been some updates with the Apple Pencil. So there's a new feature called Scribble, which allows you to handwrite into any text field, and then that's automatically converted to text. And then on top of that, while you're in, taking notes or things like that, there's some neat features like scratch to delete or circle to select. And on top of that, you can also copy and paste that handwritten text into other text fields or other apps and things like that. And then again, that's automatically pasted as text. Now, these are things that are available on Samsung Note devices, but just not to this extent. If you were to try and copy and paste some handwritten text, it would literally try and copy a picture of that text instead of the actual text itself. So again, another example of Apple coming a little bit late to the game, but just implementing it a little bit better. And there's also been some updates with the Notes app, so you can actually search for handwritten text. On top of that, there's a new feature called Smart Selection that just allows you to drag your finger over handwritten text to select it so that you can then copy and paste it. On top of that, there is shape recognition. So if you try and draw a shape and you're not the best artist, it will automatically, input that shape that you were trying to draw. And then last but not least, there's also data detection. So if you write down an address or something, a phone number, email address, you can then click on it and then it allows you to act upon it. So you can create a contact or create an event from that handwritten information. Again, another feature that is not available on the Samsung Galaxy Note devices, even though they've had the S Pen for, roughly 10 years now. Now, moving on to WatchOS 7, there are some new features here as well, but mostly a lot of fine tuning. Now, one of the features is an automatic hand washing feature. Now, given the state of the world, with the pandemic going on, this is a very notable and useful feature. So as you start to wash your hands, the Apple Watch will be able to detect that and then start a 20-second timer for you that doesn't finish until you complete washing your hands. So that's very, very useful, very notable. In addition, Apple has finally added sleep tracking to the Apple Watch. Now, this is something that's been available on Android for many, many years, and I don't see any differences here as far as how they're implementing it, so I'm not sure if the tracking will be better. We'll just have to wait and see how that actually shakes down. But again, this is something that Android has had available to them, specifically on these Samsung smartwatches, and it works very, very well. This is something that I use on a regular basis. So that is some nice functionality to finally add to the Apple Watch. In addition to sleep tracking, another one of the flagship features with watchOS 7 is the ability to share watch faces. So now it's very, very simple. You just hold down on that watch face, hit share, and then you can send that out to one of your contacts. They've also made it easier to download new watch faces from the web or from various apps. And in addition to that, you can now add as many as 4 complications to the watch face, just allowing, again, greater customization. And that is another one of the fine-tuning features that Apple has focused on with this release. And finally, they've added a few new automatically detected workouts, one of which is dancing. And the way that they're tracking that definitely seems very elaborate. So I'm very interested to see exactly how that shakes down. Dancing is a feature that is trackable on Samsung watches, but it doesn't seem to be as elaborately tracked. So like I said, I'll be interested to see exactly how that works. In addition, there is now cycling directions within maps, so you can see that directly on the watch, and you can add stops along the route. You can change the routes, things of that nature. And then last but not least is Siri translations. So that's another flagship feature that they've added to watchOS, iPadOS, and iOS as well. Translations via Siri, and you can hold conversations that way. So again, a little bit of fine tuning, but also adding a few notable and very, very useful features, I would say. All right, now moving on to macOS 11 Big Sur. They're finally moving away from macOS 10, and we're seeing a very, very nice, at least I think it's nice, very nice visual redesign. So we're seeing some uniformity across apps. So the app icons have been redesigned. They all have rounded corners now, and they do look a little bit more playful, which again, I think it looks very nice. In addition, Apple has added some new icons to the sidebar menus, and then in addition, they've added a little bit of translucence to that sidebar menu so you can see the wallpaper shining through, and that just gives it a little bit of flair, and like I said, it looks very, very nice in my opinion. And last but not least, you can actually customize the control center, and then you can drag your favorite settings onto the toolbar at the top, and you can now add widgets to the notification center. So now it's a combination of notifications and widgets, and again, it's had a very nice visual overhaul. Now the functionality is overall pretty much the same, but it just looks a lot better, a lot cleaner, and a lot more uniform. And when it comes to Safari, you can now customize the home page, so you can add like a nice wallpaper or picture to that home page. They're also claiming that there is much better performance, and they also were bold enough to claim that it has better performance than Google Chrome, which is what I'm sure most people use. In fact, myself on my iMac, I use Chrome instead of Safari. In addition, it's got better power efficiency, so it's not so heavy on the battery. And they've also added password monitoring, so you can easily check if your password has been a part of a data breach. And then last but not least, they've added Safari extensions. So similar to the extensions that you can have on Chrome, like Grammarly or Wikibuy or Honey, they have now added support for that in Safari. So I'm sure that'll get ramped up very soon, and there'll be a whole slew of those extensions that are available just like they are for Chrome or Edge or other browsers. And I would say that's pretty much it for the big announcements in relation to macOS 11. Again, it's just a very, very nice visual overhaul that just adds some uniformity across all Apple devices. Now, one of the major announcements, instead of hardware this year, they announced that Apple will be moving away from Intel chips and they will be using their own silicon moving forward. Now, they will have the first system that has Apple silicon by the end of the year, but they say the complete transition will take about 2 years. So in the meantime, they will still have devices that run Apple silicon as well as Intel silicon over the course of 2 years. And they've added a lot of development features that will make this a very, very seamless transition for developers. And that about wraps up all of the updates from WWDC 2020. I do want to mention that I thought the production was outstanding. I would honestly argue that it was much better than their live presentations. If you weren't able to catch it, I would definitely recommend watching a recap, or at least some highlights from it, just so you can see how they were doing the transitions around the that new Apple campus, and it honestly just looked stunning. So very good job to Apple on that one, and that pretty much wraps it up here. So if you liked the video, if you found it informative, then make sure to leave a like, drop a comment, hit the subscribe button, but most importantly, hit the bell so that you can be notified when I upload more videos discussing my experience with today's dopest tech. That's all for now, guys. But wait. One more thing. Wait. Hit the subscribe button. Once, you can do it 3 times, you can do it 5 times, however many times you like. Just make sure it's an odd number. All right, guys. I'll see you in the next one. Peace and love.